Yeah, I wrote that.
Okay, let's get started. Can we get started? Thank you. All right, there we go. I'm back. Lucky me, in a sense, not you. Okay, so since we left off with HPLC and then Gary stepped in and wouldn't give me any of his time, so we'll just go back a little bit and do a recap and then continue where we left off. And hopefully I'll finish the HPLC, and with that would be the material for your quiz 2 next Monday. So anything we covered after HPLC is not going to be in the quiz, it will be in the exam the week after. Is this always like that? All right, so how does temperature impact resolution? Remember what we talked about when you guys were doing the HPLC lab? I'm just going to go with spin. The what? Volatility. Okay, you're mixing HPLC with GC. Increase what? Mobile what? Mobility. Oh, okay. Can anybody else elaborate? Okay, go for it.
So the liquid mobile phase will get less viscous.
Yes.
So I think that improves the resolution.
Yes. So the
It gets on and on faster.
So the mobile phase becomes less viscous. That helps with the mass transfer. So your solutes will be able to go in and out faster between the stationary phase and the mobile phase. So at higher temperature, the solute mobility will be faster, and the solvent will be less viscous, allowing for that transfer to occur at a faster rate. So you reach equilibrium faster, you get a sharper peak and better resolution. So how does flow rate impact resolution? Okay, go.
Depending on if it's too fast or too slow, like if your flow rate's too fast, you can get clustering of your peaks, and so they'll blend together. You won't be able to actually separate. If they're same if they're too slow, they can cluster together and get drawn out.
Okay, so the first part of your answer is correct. If it's too fast, you won't have enough time to reach equilibrium, so the peaks will start coming out too fast and they will collude with each other. If it's too slow, your peak will actually become broader. It will stay longer, so they will have more diffusion, longitudinal diffusion, movement within the stationary phase rather than going in and out and equilibrating. So you will have broader peaks, and because of that, broader peaks can overlap, and then you won't have peak separation. So there's always an optimum for flow rate. And you don't want to be too high, you don't want to be too low, and that depends on the method, each solute that you are running and the method that you're running, so this varies. And also the temperature, you don't want it to be too high because there's also your column has certain stability, thermal stability, you don't want to exceed that. You don't want it to be too hot or too high also with temperature where you don't get enough time to equilibrate. So we need to find optimal conditions so that we can get optimal resolution. What are the advantages of HPLC over low pressure liquid chromatography? Okay, Joe?
It's faster.
One is faster. What else? Josie?
Reuse the columns.
Reusable column without having to pack yourself. Yeah?
Better resolution.
Better resolution, better efficiency. So you have the high performance liquid chromatography, your stationary phase is packed under pressure, so you have very few free spaces. That means you don't have a lot of room for your solute to go in and wander. So it's pretty well packed. So resolution is really better than low pressure chromatography. That results in also higher efficiency rate. Basically, your analysis time is shorter, better resolution, more efficiency in general. Better for quantification because you have better resolution. All right, what is gradient elution in HPLC specifically, Farah?
It's taking the complication, actually making the complication higher with time.
So, okay, so increasing the strength, I would say, of your mobile phase, or changing the flow rate, or changing the temperature. Anything you would change during an elution will make it a gradient elution. But most commonly, it's changing the strength of your mobile phase. It's not always in one direction. If you have a reverse phase chromatography, increasing the strength would be increasing the acetonitrile or methanol or organic solvent concentration. However, if it's normal phase, you would increase the concentration of your polar mobile phase. Most often would be water. So depending on the anion exchange, it would be changing the pH, increasing the salt. So change the gradient elution and the strength of the mobile phase, the way that you would change it depends on the mode of separation that you have. Okay. How does the packing and thickness of the stationary phase impact resolution?
The better packed and thinner the stationary phase is, your resolution will be better because you'll reach equilibrium quicker.
That is correct. So like we said with HPLC column, they're more packed, so you have less vacuum or free space. But also if you have a hollow tube, like capillary tubes, they have some in HPLC, but they're most common in GC. You have a thin layer of stationary phase. That means your solute doesn't have a lot of time to go in and wander. It would come out faster and equilibrium would reach faster. So what are the advantages of a narrow diameter column? Yes, John?
Increase the peak response.
Increase the peak response. Very good. So you have better resolution, your peak response will be higher, then you'll increase the sensitivity of your detection. So sharper peaks, longer heights of the peak, that will increase the sensitivity of your detection. What is the guard column and and its function? What is its function?
The guard column helps protect the column from like large particles going into it. That would block it up and give you an effective resolution of peaks.
Okay, so it's not necessarily large. You want to say something else, Ingrid? You want to go with what Erin says? Okay, so basically what I want to say here is what Erin said is correct in terms of you want to protect the column from impurities. They're not necessarily large because you do filter your sample before you inject it. Sometimes your sample contains impurities or components that are, for example, can bind strongly to your stationary phase and not want to leave. For example, in hydrophobic or in reverse phase chromatography, you might have very strongly hydrophobic components that might interact with your functional groups and not want to leave. No matter how much you increase your acetonitrile, they will just there and block your functional groups on the column, and therefore you lose capacity of the column. And when you lose capacity, your retention time becomes shorter, and therefore you will have peak coming closer to each other and you lose resolution. How many solvents and pumps can one use in HPLC?
Is that up to 4?
Up to 4. It's very expensive to have 4 pumps. If you want to have a quaternary kind of system, normally it is done where you have mixing before entering the column. Sometimes, like you saw, whoever did the LCMS today, in that system, we had 1 pump and 4 entrances of the mobile phase, and the mixing occurs before it goes into the pump. In general, you do have, with HPLC, you do have 2 pumps if you commonly use a binary system. So you get mixing under pressure after the pump starts in each mobile phase. But yeah, you can have up to 4 different solvents at a time. You can have 1, you can have 2, 3, or 4. Okay, so with that, I'll move forward and continue with HPLC detection. We talked about colors last time, and we talked about the different units of HPLC, and we stopped at detectors. So for the detectors, you have so many different types of detectors that can go with your HPLC unit. One of the most common, if not the most common, is UV detectors. So UV vis, and next lecture we'll talk about spectroscopy and UV absorption and fluorescence and all of that. But UV vis, basically you require a chromophore. That means a compound that have the capability of absorbing light, whether in the UV spectrum or the visible spectrum. So such compounds are proteins, amino acids can be also, some of them, not all of them, and polyphenols are great examples. Caffeine that you did last week in lab, there are examples of color compounds, carotenoids. So a bunch of different compounds that we analyze in food are chromophores. So UV detectors, you have two main types. One type is your regular workhorse detector that we use called variable-wavelength detector. There is an older one that is no longer popular. It's called just the fixed UV detector, where the instrument has only one filter or two filter maximum, allowing absorbance at 1 or 2 wavelengths, nothing else. But the variable wavelength detector allows detection of any wavelength in the UV visible range. So how it works, so you either have a deuterium lamp for UV detection or tungsten lamp for visible light detection or absorbance. So the variable, it allows the selection of the operating wavelength. In HPLC lab, I showed you the PDA, which I'll talk about it in a bit, and I showed you the variable wavelength detector, and I told you that with the variable wavelength detector, we have to pre-select our wavelength. And how it works is that I don't have a diagram in here, but I'll just illustrate. So how it works, basically, is you have your flow cell. So you have your flow cell where your sample gets in, and then here you will have your lamp. Ignore my drawing, I don't draw very well, but you have a lamp, but, okay, well, not that close, but. So you have a lamp, and then it gives light. That light is composed of so many different wavelengths. It's not a single wavelength light. So it will hit either a diffracting unit or a prism. So what happens when it hits that grating diffracting unit, your light will be split into individual wavelengths. Let's say here it is lambda of 280, 290, whatever, and there's many in between, and so on. If this is a deuterium lamp, it will go between 200 and 400. So what happens here, you have all your light is split into individual wavelengths, and then you have a filter, or not necessarily a filter, an opening, where a particular wavelength enter, 3 or 4, let's say. Very narrow opening that allows mostly one wavelength or very, very closely related wavelengths to each other. Probably, 304 and 303 might be able to enter, and then hit your flow cell. Whatever components you have will absorb the light, and then the remainder, the transmitted light that was not absorbed, will hit your a converter that converts basically a photon of light to electric signal, and then you get LED. So this whole unit here is called a monochromator. So it's basically allowing one single wavelength or a very narrow range of wavelengths to enter and hit your sample. So in the caffeine lab, we selected 272 nanometer. So that other instrument that we had, that we showed as demonstration, we had to select the slit that allows 272 to enter and hit your sample. So basically, you select the appropriate wavelength. That is when you know from a photodiode array detector, let's say, that your maximum absorbance occurs at 272, then you can select for that. We always select for the wavelength that gives you maximum. Not always, I want to say, mostly, because some cases you have to deviate to allow for avoiding of interference. But in most cases, we select the wavelength that gives you the highest absorbance, because that would give you the optimal sensitivity and differentiation between two closely related concentrations. So that's that. And some variable wavelength detector, you can observe at 2 wavelengths. You can actually change and monitor wavelength at a certain point during the chromatogram, because at the beginning you might be monitoring compounds that absorb at 254 or 249. They're very closely related. And then at the end of the chromatogram, you might want to monitor those that absorb at 259. So you can change after 30 minutes, you can change the detection to another wavelength. So you can do that, and thus the name variable. Okay. The photodiode array detector, which you guys have used, and we collected caffeine data using this detector. In this case, you have a different setup. In this case, all the light hits your sample from a deuterium lamp. No diffraction. All the light hits the sample, and after that, there is the grading system which diffracts the light, and then there will be diodes. Each one of them will receive a wavelength of light, and each one of them will convert the wavelength of light into an electrical signal. And that will generate a spectrum. Like you saw in the lab, you had, let's say, from 200 to 400 nanometer scan, and here you were monitoring absorbance. And if you remember, you have the solvent here, because acetonitrile absorb at 220 or 210, and then you saw your caffeine lambda max absorb at 272. So you saw that it has a unique spectrum where it doesn't absorb here at, let's say, 240, and it doesn't absorb at 300 or whatever. So you don't have absorbance here. So you will have for every compound a spectra, a unique fingerprint that shows you at which wavelength that compound will absorb. Some of them, the ones we looked at different peaks in the coffee, let's say, some of them had this kind of, they had different maxima. They absorb at 2 different lambda maxes, not only one. So they really differ. So every compound is somewhat unique. But we also looked at a compound that was related when one had a sugar moiety and one didn't have a sugar moiety, and they had the same spectra, and that was because the sugar does not absorb UV light. So while this is a beautiful instrument, it still has its limitation. It doesn't give you everything that allows identification. And usually you get a scan every fraction of a second. So this will give you a 3-dimensional data. You get the wavelength, you get the time, you get the absorbance, and you can plot and then select the wavelength where you get the highest absorbance to use to determine the areas. And those what you've gotten the area at maximum absorbance, and use this to determine concentration in your beverages. So advantages of that, like we demonstrated in the lab, you can identify if a peak comes out at the same time as caffeine. For example, a decaf coffee, when we saw one peak, at the beginning of it, it had a specific spectra. At the end of it, it has a different type of spectra. So it can tell you, like in this example, you have two different compounds present in that one peak. So it can, the PDA can tell you that this peak is not pure. It is there's a co-elution occurring. Then you would know, okay, I need to do something to my method to allow for separation. So this would be a regular UV variable wavelength detection where you won't see these two peaks. This would be hidden behind that, so you won't see it. You just see one peak. However, when you look at the PDA, you can see two different spectra. Okay. Fluorescence is another common detector coupled with HPLC. You can use fluorescence to measure compounds that can fluoresce. Compounds that can fluoresce meaning they absorb light and then they emit back radiation. So, and we'll talk about fluorescence in detail when we talk about spectroscopy, but that's what I want you to just know for now. Fluorescence is emitting of light after absorption. So a molecule gets excited, and then when it goes back to ground state, it emits radiation, and that can be quantified. So this could be quantified for certain compounds, such as vitamins, aflatoxins. Sometimes what you do is to determine amino acids, for example, you mix them with OPA reagent, and then you can measure fluorescence after that. So you can apply fluorescence for many different applications. Diffractive index is a very common detector for sugars and carbohydrate analysis. It's very common. It's basically based on measuring diffractive index as the solute leaves the column. So when the solute leaves the column and reaches the detector, it's going to change the diffractive index of the mobile phase. So when you have mobile phase, a constant mobile phase, the diffractive index will give you a reading of the total solids. And then once another solute or solid passes by, it will change the diffractive index. The same principle when you use diffractive index to determine total soluble solids, basically. But there is one caveat with the diffractive index is you cannot use gradient dilution. Why is that?
Because you only have one reference cell, and it's just, we can't change the concentration otherwise we change your reference.
Yes, it's changing the ref, exactly. So the instrument is set up is that you only have one reference cells, which is the mobile phase at a particular concentration. And then when you change the concentration of the mobile phase, you are changing the refractive index of that mobile phase. So you cannot really read the concentration of your solute when your mobile phase is affecting the refractive index reading. So you cannot have a reference. There are no systems built where it allows for multiple references to have in there multiple mobile phase concentration. It's not on the market. So electrochemical detection. So mostly are used in two cases where you can either oxidize or reduce an analyte, and the detector in this case is called amperometric detector. So if an analyte can be oxidized or reduced, then you can detect the ion, the change in the ionization state or the electron state of that analyte. And also you can measure conductivity. So either you can have a conductivity detector or you can have an amperometric detector. The conductivity is when you're detecting ions, when you can detect change in the ion conductivity between two electrodes. That means when your solute goes in and it's in an ionic state, it will change the conductivity reading. So this is mostly used for organic acids, and it can also be used for carbohydrates. Light scattering is a universal detector, I would say. It's a universal detector because it's not based on a specific inherent characteristic of the solute. It's basically based on the fact that the solute is going to scatter light for you. And when the light scatters, less light will reach the detector, and based on that, you can do quantification. In regular light scattering detector, the solvent evaporates and the remaining solutes scatter the light. However, in new detector, which you don't have in your notes, you can write that down, is the multi-angle laser light scattering detector. So this detector basically allows for determination of molecular weight, and it's mostly coupled with size exclusion chromatography. It's mostly coupled with size exclusion HPLC specifically. So what it does, it has photo detectors. That means you don't have to evaporate the solvent, and the solutes in your system, they will diffract the light, and then your light will get scattered, and it will scatter over multiple photodetectors, and each one of them will detect and gives you an electrical signal, and a computer will gather the data, and based on how each molecule scattered the light, you'll get a molecular weight estimation. Of course, you run this with standards so that you can get kind of calibration for that. Of course, some of you started the MS lab. You can, instead of linking standard detectors, you can link the HPLC directly to a mass detector. Sometimes you have two detectors in a row. You can have a UV detector, and then the flow from the UV detector gets split and go to the MS. And then you can get mass. When your sample is ionized, then you can get molecular mass, or what we call N by Z value. Depending on the charge that it carries, you get mass by the charge value from the detector. It's a very good tool for identification, and we gave examples in the lab during the LC lab, and then you'll have more examples, explanation when you run the MS lab. Okay, the last one here is basically you carry out a chemical reaction to induce a certain property for a product or generate a product in order for it to be detected. So most common is detection of amino acid. You can either do a pre-column derivatization, that means you have reaction with OPA reagent, and with that you generate compounds that can fluoresce, and then you would use a fluorescence detection. Or you can do a post-column derivatization, and there are systems that make that automated, that you can have a system with an automated post-column derivatization. You use anhydride, and then in this case you measure absorbance of light. Any questions about any of these detectors?
So when it derivatizes post-column, does it like add something into the system basically, like as it's coming out the column?
Yeah, there will be a reactor, so your eluent is going to come out at a particular time and get mixed to the chemical, in this case anhydride, and then it leaves into the detector at a particular and absorb light at a particular wavelength. Is
one better than the other?
No, it's a good question. Is one better than the other? It depends what you have in your lab. Do you have a fluorescence detector in your lab? And then your personnel is more familiar with this, and you don't have an automated post-column reactor, then you wouldn't do that.
But there's no like, because it would be like automated, it doesn't like increase your replications or anything, since it's generally probably done by a person.
Yeah, well actually if it's automated, it would reduce the experimental error if your system is working better.
So theoretically it might be.
Theoretically it's easier that way if you have the system.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a table. You have that in your chapter. This is a good summary table again for you to review and to have an idea of the different applications. So we will go over different chapters. For example, I'll extensively talk about carbohydrate analysis and using HPLC for carbohydrate analysis when we cover that chapter. But it's kind of a summary to what analyte would be analyzed using what separation mode and what method of detection. So we will have a chapter on carbohydrate, vitamins, amino acid, pesticide, mycotoxin. We will talk about all of these in different chapters, but this is a summary table. Okay. Oh, by the way, I should brag here a little bit. Before, in the current textbook that you have, chromatography and spectroscopy come later, after so many chapters. And finally, after 5 editions, I convinced the editor you have to put chromatography and spectroscopy first, before hitting carbohydrate and protein analysis and all of that. So that's going to change. So the next edition will have chromatography first. Yay, Pam. I'm bragging. Okay. All right. So you've heard me say this multiple times now, but the different applications of HPLC, for example, normal phase, you want to remember that you want your solute to interact with your stationary phase. That's as a first step of separation. If it doesn't interact with your stationary phase, you're not going to get separation. It's going to go in your void volume. You don't want that to happen. So if you remember that concept, you will remember that when you use normal phase, you have a polar stationary phase and a non-polar mobile phase. So for this kind of system, mostly polar compounds will be used to separate and analyze. So in this case, carbohydrates, some pesticides that are polar, you have non-polar pesticides, you have polar pesticides, and water-soluble vitamins. And the reverse phase is the opposite. So mostly relatively non-polar compounds will interact with a non-polar stationary phase, and therefore you get separation. So you have non-polar pesticides, peptides and amino acids. Some peptides can be hydrophilic though. They might not be perfectly separated with the reverse phase. Mycotoxins, antibiotics, again, there are a series of different types of mycotoxins, antibiotics, or those that are mostly non-polar. Fat-soluble vitamins, phenolic compounds, and alkaloids such as the caffeine. That's why we use reverse phase for caffeine. The ion pair reverse phase, if you have charged molecules, but you have a reverse phase system that you want to use, you can actually add an ions to your mobile phase to pair your charged molecules so that they lose their charge. When they lose their charge, then they can interact with the column. That's why it's called ion pair reverse phase. It's masking the charge on your molecule so that they can interact with your nonpolar reverse phase column. These are just examples. So here you have rice bran, so you have different types of tocopherols and tocotrienols, and this is a normal phase. So alpha T, for example, is it the most polar or the least polar? It's normal phase. So the first peak right here, is it most polar or least polar? Least polar, yes. Because the most polar will interact the most with your column and will leave last, and this is here the opposite, and here's analysis of B6. Again, here, the most polar will come out first, and the least polar will come out last. These are just example chromatograms. So ion exchange, so by definition, your compound needs to have a charge in order to be separated using ion exchange. Carbohydrates normally don't have charge, but there are ways that you would make them have charge. For example, dissolve them in alkaline solution. They are very weak acids. Sugars are weak acids. So if you dissolve them in alkaline, pH 12, they're going to reluctantly give you their hydrogen. And when they do that, they become negatively charged. So you can do ion exchange for carbohydrates. So there's a list of charged molecules that you can separate. Size exclusion is often used as a low pressure chromatography system where you use it as a preparative way or way to isolate a certain compound or purify a certain compound. But there are applications for HPLC size exclusion. One of them is very common. We do it in our lab actually currently, and we use it to estimate the molecular weight of gluten proteins from flour, from different sources of flour. So you do use size exclusion as HPLC to determine molecular weight of proteins, amyloid, aminopectin, etc. So you do use it, but it is not very commonly used as a tool for detection and quantification. It would be here in this case a tool to determine molecular weight accurately. Because if you use low pressure liquid chromatography, determination of molecular weight might not be as accurate because the resolution is not as great. Okay. Affinity chromatography. This is a very specific chromatography. You have to have a very specific type of interaction. It's great if you have it. It's a great tool. It would give you excellent sensitivity and detection. But it's very specific. So you would use antibodies or specific ligands for glycoproteins, antibodies for allergens, enzyme inhibitors for enzyme, and probably antibodies for mycotoxins. So it would be a very specific interaction between a molecule of interest and what you have positioned on your stationary phase, the ligand that you have bound to your stationary phase. So these are just examples of anions in coffee. You use anion exchange chromatography for that. I did say we might go over that question in the quiz. Let me see how much time I have at the end. Again, ion exchange chromatography has been very confusing for students. But when we want to detect anions, then it's called anion exchange chromatography. What would be the charge of your functional groups? Positive. So you want your anions to interact. Again, remember you have to have interaction with the column as the first step. So if you're exchanging anions, if you're separating anions, so your functional group would be positively charged. Okay. Size exclusion chromatography, this is an example of, let's say, cell wall pectin. And with size exclusion, the smaller would come out first. No. Larger would come out first. The smaller the molecule, the more it's going to go through the particle pores, get detained, travels in every single pore, and the larger it is, it will have less pores accessibility, so it will leave the column faster. Here's an example of using multiple HPLC in tandem, if you want, or in three-dimensional, two-dimensional, three-dimensional. So here, let's say you are you want to generate a product from proteins. You want to hydrolyze the proteins and generate peptides that are antioxidants. Okay, so you want to isolate the most potent antioxidant peptide from your mixture for different applications. So you have put enzyme, you have put your protein, and then you generate a mixture of peptide, not one peptide, you'll have a mixture of it. So you want to get out the one that has the most activity. How you do that with a series of chromatography, separation. So you know that your peptide is going to be small. You're looking for, let's say, 2 to 20 amino acids. That would be your regular size peptide. So what you want to do with ultrafiltration is get rid of everything larger than 20 amino acids. An amino acid average molecular weight is 135. 20 times 135, do the math. It's about what? 2,700? Yeah? So then you want to have a cutoff, let's say, of 3 kilodalton. Then everything larger than 3 kilodalton you get rid of, and you take whatever non-retentate permeate that goes through the filter, you collect that, and that would be your first purification step. So then you will do either, it doesn't matter the order, ion exchange followed by size exclusion, or size exclusion followed by ion exchange. It doesn't matter the order. Some people like to start with separating based on weight first, molecular weight or molecular size, and then on charge. It doesn't really matter. what matter is having two-dimensional separation. So what happens here, for example, you will have, let's say you use size exclusion first. So you'll get your monitoring, notice here at 215, because it's peptides. Peptides absorb around 214 to 220 nanometer. Proteins can absorb at 280 because they have the aromatic amino acids in them, but peptide might not. So we always want to measure at the peptide absorbance wavelength. So basically what you'll see here is see certain peptides, peaks, and then you collect each peak and you run your assay, your bioactivity assay or antioxidant assay or whatever. And then you look at, say, okay, the peak F has the highest activity. So I take that fraction and subject it to ion exchange chromatography. Okay? And then from there, I can get, I get different peaks again. Those will be similar size, similar charge. So I look at the one with the highest, F fraction number 4 has the highest activity. I take that and I run reverse phase chromatography to get even more specific interactions. So you might have two peptides, same molecular weight, and then same charge, but they are still co-eluting. So you run reverse phase, and then you look at the fraction that has the highest, you collect that, you attach it to the MS, and you can do a stepwise MS detection and get sequencing of your peptide. So you not only you isolated your peptide, you determined at this point the peptide composition, and you got the peptide that is most potent, that has the highest activity. So you can do a lot of different things with HPLC, and this is one of the applications that is cool. You can purify using multiple modes of separation, and then identification. Okay, take out a piece of paper in the last 7 minutes, write your name on it. It will be extra credit for plus, let's see, plus 2 or plus 5. This is plus 2. Okay. Okay, so this is a typical chromatogram that I showed all of you that did the LC lab. I showed you chromatogram of isoflavones, and some of you started already doing the LCMS with isoflavones from soap. So these are 12 different compounds. They are very similar in structure, and they elute at different times. And here's the gradient that we use. We start with 17% acetonitrile. Over 25 minutes, the acetonitrile concentration increases to 25%. We leave it stable for 5 minutes, and then it goes up to 30%. We leave it stable for 10 minutes, and then we go back to the starting concentration, and we let it equilibrate. Remember, we have to give it time for the whole system to come back to the same concentration. Okay, so looking at this, let me know now, is this normal phase or reverse phase? And why? You gotta write down, even if it's wrong answer, write it down for the extra credit. And then the brave soul will tell me the answer. So anybody wants to volunteer? Is this the reverse phase or normal phase? Hold on. Let me see anybody else. Come on, you know this. Sarah.
Oh, I said reverse.
Why did you say reverse phase, Sarah?
Because it only starts out at 17% acetonitrile, so the normal phase is
Very good. Yes. So it is reverse phase. We start at a relatively polar mobile phase, so 83% water and 17% acetonitrile. And we are increasing the acetonitrile in this case. So we're increasing the organic mobile phase. So this is a reverse phase chromatography. Okay. Which isoflavones is most polar? So if it's a reverse phase, the interaction with the column would be based on nonpolar or polar interaction? Non-polar. You have to have non-polar interaction with non-polar column. So the most polar will be eluting first. So that would be diazine. Diazine, not diazine. Diazine will leave the column first because it likes the column the least. Okay, and it leaves the column before the concentration of acetonitrile creeps up to be higher than 17. Okay. How would you change, now this is the interesting part. How would you change the mobile phase so that genistein would elute sooner without changing the relative positions of the other compounds? Let's go back. So genistein is here. How do you make it eluting at, let's say, 48 probably minutes? How would you let it come at 40 minutes without affecting the others? Hold on. Anybody else? Other than the regular ones, maybe?
After 35 minutes, you increase the...
After what?
After the detection of age in...
So what? Tell me in time.
Yeah, 35 minutes.
After 35 minutes, what would I do?
To increase the mobile phase concentration.
Which concentration I would increase? The water or the acetonitrile? Yes, yeah.
Acetonitrile.
No, we shall, yes. So you increase the acetonitrile concentration after 35 minutes to even higher than 30. Yeah, you can just bump it up to 40 and keep going up. Don't stabilize. Between 40 to 50, you don't have to stabilize. You can keep increasing higher, yes.
Would increasing the flow rate also?
Well, I said, remember, it's a good thing, yeah, it will come sooner, but you will change the positions of the other ones as well.
After everything else is already...
Oh, after, okay, yeah, if the system allows you to change the flow rate, some system allows you to have a gradient flow rate, some system you cannot change the flow rate during a run. But yeah, you could, that's another, yeah, that's another way of doing it. Okay. What would happen if you keep an isochromatic elution mode at 17%? That means from the beginning to end, it's 17%. Relax. Some new phase. Okay, next time I'm bringing chocolates. So what will happen? Yes. It will take forever, I tell you. It's just going to go on and on and on. And not only that, you're going to get broadening of the peaks. And if you get broadening of the peaks, those peaks that you have here, those 3 peaks will co-elute. It will just be one very broad peak. So, no, you don't want to do that in this case. Okay. What would happen? Well, I already asked that. That's it? I'm done? Okay. I'm done. All right. So Wednesday we'll start spectroscopy. Oh, one thing before you guys split, I just want to remind you that preliminary summary for your projects are due soon. Was it on the 22nd of October? Okay, I only have one student that already signed up to meet with me.